Happy Friday, everybody. It is Friday morning. It is July 19th, 6:18 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Getting a little bit of an early jump to get home on my commute from CBS Sports Radio Network. And this is the place that you guys join me every morning on my ride home. Maybe I shouldn't say every morning because yesterday I was nowhere to be found. My apologies. I actually went right after work to play some golf yesterday. First time I've played golf in almost 4 years. It's insane. I can't believe I haven't played golf in almost 4 years, but it was a lot better than I anticipated. Not that anybody of you out there care, but I shot an 87 on a course I'd never played before, and like I said, I haven't picked up a golf club in almost 4 years, so I'm going to brag about that just a little bit. But other than that, we're talking New York today. All right, we normally talk about everything that's going on in the sports world. And yes, I am a homegrown Yankee fan. Knicks, Jets, Islanders, these are the teams I root for. Anyone who knows me knows this. And I don't normally talk just New York on the way home, but I feel like that's the direction we need to go today. All right, if you were watching the Yankees yesterday, they played a doubleheader. There was a little rain out the day before. You get a little doubleheader against the Rays, their closest division rival. They're not really rivals, but they are in second place in the AL East as of now. I think you see the Red Sox overtake that position and ultimately make the playoffs at some point this season. I think you'll see that transition. The Rays are having a nice season, but Blake Snell is not the Cy Young Award winner we saw from the year before. Their team, while Charlie Morton has been absolutely fantastic, their team is not that complete. They don't have the payroll. They certainly don't have the stadium and the facility to support a 90-95 win team. So ultimately, I don't think the Rays are going to make the playoffs. Plus, the Yankees absolutely just mash and destroy the Rays when they play them. At least that's been the history. So those who are watching the Yankees and the Rays, we got to see something and hear something a little bit special. We got a little taste of Aaron Boone, and listen, this is fun, right? Aaron Boone, he's cursing, he's screaming, he's upset, he's in the heat of the moment, he feels that he's a rookie umpire, right? It was like his fourth or fifth, game behind the plate, I believe. And he made his debut in April this year, in the major leagues. So he's a rookie. That doesn't mean he should be good or bad in one way. He's just a rookie, so he's inexperienced. You could see the look on his face as he's getting yelled at by Aaron Boone. But let's run you through this real quick. So Brett Gardner gets called out on strikes in the second inning, and it's a pitch that's inside. It's off the plate, clearly not a strike. But listen, umps are not perfect. They're not robots, they're not machines. Eventually they may get replaced by machines. But for now, you have umpires behind the plate calling balls, calling strikes. This is a ball. I'm not saying that because I'm a Yankee fan. It just was, right? And I don't know, in an honest moment, if the umpire would tell you that it was a ball and that he just missed one, I don't know that you ever get that response from an umpire. As always, you join me on my way home from work, and we're going to try to drive around a garbage truck that's going 12 miles an hour, so bear with me. Let's see how this goes. Here we go. And away we go. And of course, you can find me on Twitter as well, at Dave Ettinger2. This is the Dave Talk Sports podcast. I'm losing track here, but I'm pretty sure this is episode number 21, and I am your host, Dave Ettinger. So, Brett Gardner gets called out on strikes. Not a strike, but it is what it is. Then you get Brett Gardner promptly beating up the dugout with his bat in just absolute frustration, just losing it. And, it's in the heat of the moment. It's, I guess you call it a big game. And the next at-bat, Aaron Boone is chirping. He's chirping at the umpire. He's telling him to... And again, you could hear it. You could find this rant. It's all over the place. It's on social media. When I get home, I will post a link to it on Twitter, so you guys can check it out as well. He's letting the expletives fly. And he's really telling the guy, tighten it up. Let's bleepity bleep and go. We need to, really tighten up the strike zone here. We need to really get with the program, because so far, that's not it. That's not the game we should be calling. And the ump turns to him and he says, that's enough. He says, I heard you, in a way to kind of say, all right, Aaron, I've heard enough. I need you to be quiet now. Aaron Boone, I guess, didn't like that all that much. And he comes out of the dugout as he gets ejected. Getting ejected from the game, and he says, you know what? I'm going to get my money's worth. Now, as much as people are enjoying this rant, I'm going to tell you that this was like the most polite rant in the history of umpire confrontations. He says, and again, you can watch the whole video when I post it, but he says, you're having a really, really bleepity bleeping start to this game. Really bad. You got to tighten it up. What are we doing here? All these things that he's saying, and he says, I feel bad for you, but tighten it up. I feel bad for you? I'm sorry, when I scream at somebody at the top of my lungs, not that it happens very often, and I'm screaming and cursing because somebody did something really screwed up, I don't think I'm thinking about the feelings of the other person. I feel bad for you? And then he even turns and he says, and he points to the pitcher out on the mound, and he goes, that guy's a really good pitcher, but what are you doing to us? Blah, 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 blah. Tighten it up and F-bomb this and F-bomb that. Again, when you're in the heat of the moment and you're going on an epic rant like this, I don't know that you throw out these compliments that this guy's a really good pitcher, but, and I feel bad for you, but, it's almost like the way he was going to go after the ump was pre-planned. I don't know if that sounds ridiculous because he's in the middle of cursing and then screaming in the middle of a game, but I don't know, there's just something about it. It was it felt like the most polite rant in the history of sports. It was fun. It was cool because you're not supposed to get that audio. Right? He's mic'd up and that got picked up somehow. You don't usually get that. Right? You saw it years ago. I think it was Terry Collins got caught in an honest moment. So this stuff happens. But it's not really, you're not supposed to get this audio. So it was kind of a rare treat, if you ask me. And listen, this happens all the time. These guys are not, saying I can't say these bad words. No, these are grown men. These are adults. They're in the heat of the moment. I think you're looking at the most polite rant you've probably ever seen between an umpire and a manager. And let me point this out. When you watch the video, watch it a couple times, because you'll see there's a point towards the end of Boone's rant where he his hat makes contact with the umpire's hat, and you'll see the umpire motion to his hat and go, you made contact. Now, let me be potentially the first to say this. If Aaron Boone gets any form of suspension or fine for making contact with an ump, everyone can go screw themselves. Okay? The ump can go screw himself. The Major League Baseball commissioner, whoever's making the decision, can go screw themselves. He's out there. He's yelling. He's screaming. He's trying to get his team fired up because he knows he just got ejected. Leave some emotion for his team to work with for the next, 7+ innings. He didn't make contact with the ump. Their hats, literally gently touched. It's like that. It's like that line from Role Models, as we gingerly touch our tips. No, it wasn't like that. But he didn't make contact with the ump. If he shoved the ump, okay, you suspend him. If he goes and throws his hands up, wailing about, and he happens to bump into the ump, fine. Suspend him, fine him, do whatever you got to do. When you watch that video, please, you can comment in the YouTube comment section below the video. You can find me on Twitter at DaveEttinger2 and let me know. Because if you agree that he made contact with the ump and he needs further consequences or discipline, you're a moron. So I won't be surprised if Aaron Boone gets hit with further consequences for this, but it'll be absolutely ridiculous. Okay? Now, to continue with the absolutely ridiculous, we don't have to go far. We go across town. We go to the Mets. The Mets, they still suck, right? They're not this team that's won 4 games in a row. Well, they had won 4 games in a row until last night. Listen, they took 2 out of 3 from the Marlins. The Marlins are one of the worst teams in baseball. All right, and then they win a couple games against the Twins. The Twins may have a good record, but they're not as good as their record. And it's a 2-game set. Any team, I'm talking about Baltimore, Detroit, Miami, Kansas City, all the worst teams in the league. It's almost like any given Sunday in football. The worst teams in the league can beat the best teams in the league 2 games in a row. The pitchers go nuts that day. A surprise player hits a home run. Anything can happen in a 2-game set. I'm sorry. So, I know there's 2 wild cards in the American League and the National League, and nearly every team but the Marlins is in contention, as they'd say, for the second wild card in the National League. No, they're not. There's still only 2 teams that are going to get wild cards, and even if 8 teams are within 6 games or whatever it is right now, that doesn't mean they're in contention. The Mets have to be able to read the room, right? It's one of my favorite terms in life. Learn how to read a room. The Mets need to be sellers. I've said it before. They need to sell off anything that's not nailed to the floor, throw it overboard to keep the ship from sinking. The Mets should not be buyers at the trade deadline. I don't want to hear about how Robinson Cano has hit a couple home runs since the All-Star break. He still sucks and is ancient. I don't want to hear about the bullpen having a couple good games against the Marlins and the Twins. They still are the worst bullpen in baseball. All right, maybe last night's not the best example of that because, listen, the Mets lost to the Giants in 16 innings. In the top of the 16th inning, Pete Alonso, who else, hit another home run and put the Mets up 2-1. Now, all you got to do is get Chris Mazza, what I don't even know how to say his name because he's so unimportant, to get 3 outs and move on, and they get a win. Well, obviously, you've been watching the Mets. You're a Mets fan. You knew that wasn't going to happen. So what happens? Base runner. Brandon Crawford, Donovan Solano. Game over. Brandon Crawford hits the game-tying, I believe it was a RBI double. Donovan Solano comes up. Game winner to right field. Game over. Mets lose 3-2. The Mets score in the 16th inning and they still can't hold on and win. This bullpen is terrible. The Mets are terrible. I know Syndergaard had a great start, but the guy's ERA is still close to 5. Zach Wheeler's hurt. DeGrom's not the same DeGrom we had last year when he won the Cy Young. He's just not. The Mets are not that good of a baseball team. They're just not. Pete Alonso has been amazing. Rosario has his moments. Conforto's been pretty good. Yeah, Syndergaard and DeGrom can put together good starts, but no one is just that consistently good in the pitching rotation and the bullpen this year for the Mets. They're just not. So it was a fun game to watch. The game was still on halfway through my night of work last night overnight. I got to watch it while we were still working. So that's fun and all. But the Mets are just not that good. So don't tell me that, because these 19,000 teams are within 5 games of the second wild card, that they need to be buyers. Everyone's going to be a buyer. No, you can win 5 games in a row for all I care. You still need to be able to look in the mirror and say, we're not that good. All right, I'm not going to mortgage the future to bring in a player because I think I can make the second wild card. No, that's not what you do, right? So Mets, please learn how to read a room. Now, one more New York topic. Football It's creeping into the bloodstream. I keep telling you this, and you know. Listen, it's mid to late July. Training camps are getting underway here, and the NFL's awesome. All right, but I'm going to start today with my team, the New York Jets. Now, over the next coming days and weeks and months, I'm going to do a preview of the entire league, give you my thoughts on these teams, how many wins they're going to have, who's going to the playoffs, and ultimately who's going to win the Super Bowl. I'm going to lay out all the predictions for you right here on the Dave Talk Sports podcast. I'm your host, Dave Ettinger. I am of CBS Sports Radio Network, and this is episode number 21. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Ettinger2. You can also find me on my website and Facebook page, both named Dave Talk Sports. And this is where you find me every morning on my way home from work. So I'm going to start with the Jets, right? I went through the Jets' schedule. It's middle of the road, I would call it. They play some good teams. Obviously, they have to play the Patriots twice every year, so that always sucks. And they have a stretch in the middle of their schedule, in the middle of their season, where they play a bunch of bad teams. They get to play the Bengals. They get to play the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, who I just don't think are going to be that good. I think Nick Foles sucks. I'm sorry. So there's a lot of winnable games there, but a lot of them are on the road, right? Also, the Jets' bye, I'm pretty sure, is week 4. So I don't always love when your bye is that early or when your bye is super late. It's kind of nice when it's right smack in the middle of the season and you can really get that nice time off, that nice break. Now, the Jets' success is going to be pretty much dependent on Sam Darnold and how he plays. Now, it's a new system. It's his second year. He's going to be working under Adam Gase, the quote-unquote quarterback whisperer, quarterback guru, whatever you want to call him. He hasn't been all that successful in his tenure in the NFL. Peyton Manning coaches himself, so I don't want to hear anything about Peyton Manning. Can Adam Gase keep Sam Darnold moving that way? Move him forward, have him progress in the right direction. Listen, you got him Le'Veon Bell. He's just going to help in every single aspect of the offense. He's having a receiver and a running back in one player. The receiving core is not great, especially Herndon is suspended for the first 4 games of the year. So I don't know how much you get out of the receiving core, which potentially could be a problem. But at the end of the day, if we get to see progress from Sam Darnold, they don't have to show up in the numbers and the stats and even the win column. But just use your eyeballs and see that Sam Darnold gets it. The game is slowing down. The speed of the game is slowing down for Darnold. And you just see that he's making better reads, making smarter decisions, avoiding sacks, avoiding contact, doing all these things that a young quarterback needs to do to learn how to survive not just a season, but a career and have a successful one in New York. It's not easy. So I think that is what this season is really going to be dependent on if they win. Now, personally, I went through the schedule. I think this is an 8-8 football team, right smack in the middle of the road. I think best case scenario, they're winning 9 games. Worst case scenario, they're winning 6 or 7. Because I've been a Jets fan long enough to know that when people think they're going to win 9 or 10 games, they usually win 5 or 6. Saw that a couple years ago. So that's where we're at. We got a bunch of other things to talk about with the Jets, but we're going to get to that in the coming days, weeks, and months. Like I said, we're going to get to a full NFL preview right here on the Dave Talk Sports podcast, episode number 21. I'm your host, Dave Ettinger. Of course, you find me on Twitter at Dave Ettinger2. Like I said, I'm going to post a link to the Aaron Boone, some will call it an epic rant. I'm going to call it the most polite rant you've probably ever seen in sports. And I'll post a link to that on my Twitter page when I get home and get a chance. So, as always, I appreciate you watching. This is the Friday edition of Dave Talk Sports. You will catch me tomorrow, Saturday. I will be on here on my way to my other job. But until then, enjoy the beer.